morning. So we're working way through Shin Lamed Aleph. We're up to Seif Vav. Interesting halacha. Says the Mechaber, Machshirei Mila, the preparations one does for the bris Mila that's taking place on Shabbos, she'ef shela asoisu me'erev Shabbos, that could have been organized on Erev Shabbos, einom doichim es ha-Shabbos. They're not doicha Shabbos, because the Machshirei, that's the famous Gemara in Rabbi the Mila, the Mishnah there, that we pasken that Machshirei Mila are not doicha Shabbos. Lefichach, im lo hevi izemel lemila me'erev Shabbos, if you didn't bring the knife, the izemel, which is going to be used for the bris Mila, if you didn't bring it on Erev Shabbos, lo yivenim b'Shabbos, you can't now be over this of Hotzah and carry it on Shabbos. Even if it's not a Hotzah deraisa, it's a Hotzah drabanan. Why? Because Chazal made sure that the Isurei Drabanan have got the same status, as it were, of deraisa in a situation of chorus, which many times Issa Shabbos could involve that. To tell a non-Jewish person to do that, if the question involved is in the Drabanan, then you're allowed to tell a non-Jewish person to do it. If, however, it's a deraisa, then then you can't tell a non-Jewish person to do it. So just to summarize, Machshirei Mila, in other words, the preparations for the bris Mila, that has to be done on Friday, on Erev Shabbos, and not on Shabbos itself. It's only the Mila itself, which is Doicha Shabbos, not the Machshirei Mila. Moreover, in terms of telling a non-Jewish person to do it, and by the way, and even if the violation involved in this Drabanan, you can't do it. But in terms of telling a non-Jewish person to do it, if it's a Drabanan, you're allowed to, a deraisa not. Says the Mishnah Berurah. Izemel, u'le'inyan tiltel izemel acha mila ayin le'el b'simin shin yud, si'if katan tezvav, Mishnah Berurah sham, mashe kosavnu sham. So the two footnotes there, 2021, very interesting. What happens on a Shabbos bris regarding two things? Number one, the arla, afterwards, and number two, the izemel, because both are mukta. So how do you deal with that on a Shabbos bris? So if you look at 20, legabi tiltel ha'arla kosu b'shal shuvas neder b'Yehuda, shelechatchila lo yanechela miyad kodim sheyitin oiser ba'ofar. The meaning is you bury it in offer, and he said you shouldn't put it down and then pick it up again and put it in the offer because you got a problem with mukta. And therefore you should really keep it in your hand and then put it directly away to bury it in offer. And then do it that way. But if you didn't, and you let go of the, you've got the arla after the bris, and you put it down, and now you want to put it into some offer. Cost of Sham, the Noda B'Yehuda says, sheyesh makom lahatila harima mehaoretz v'litna ba'offer. You're allowed to pick it up and then later put it in offer. Mishum shimuchna lekach v'emedes lezeme ba'idiyim. Because really that was your objective before the bris, before Shabbos, before Ben Hashmoshes. That's point number one. Point number two is what to do with the Yizemel after the bris. So he says here in footnote 21, Kosa b'shem ataz, she'also letalteles Yizemel la'acha mila. Once you've done the bris, there's no heter anymore to touch the Yizemel, it's muktzah. You're very careful not to use this Yizemel only for a bris and not for any other purpose. Therefore, it has the status nechshavu k'muktzah machmas chisaron kis. Aval pi shebeknisas haShabbos hi Yizemel ha'omed l'melechas hamila l'machros ein muktzah lechatz haShabbos, and therefore you got a problem. And even though you're only going to use it for this, mikol machon given she muktzah ben hashmoshes miyad lachar gemay shtamshus u'chayzel is a tiltel sheben hashmoshes. So after the bris, this Yizemel has gone back to being muktzah. The Siyam Sham, and he concludes over there the Taz, Shelochein yesh la'atznias Yizemel b'chedesh shehu bohu mol, or b'shem Magen Avram Kosov, sheyesh lahach melach abris lo naniach es Yizemel el yashes biyad hashim lemokam lishmar. So the male should not let go of the Yizemel, should keep it in his hand, which is of course allowed to do during the bris, and then after the bris he should not let go of it and put it in a safe place, etc. But the Evet, because sheyesh chashash Yizemel yiganev, if we're worried it might be stolen, he quotes the Eli Rabbi but the Eved you can actually move it if you need to. Okay, Sif Katan Chof. So he said in Sif Vav, Machshirei Mila, the preparations for the Mila need to be done before Shabbos. Only the Mila itself is Doicha Shabbos. But you can tell a non-Jewish person to do a drabonon. For example, if it's not a Rishus Rabbim Deraisa, you can tell the non-Jewish person to bring the Zemel. Says the Mishnah Berurah, why? To have a shvus to shvus, mocha mitzvah v'shari. It's double shvus. You're only over Issa drabonon, and you're telling a non-Jewish person to do it. It's self shvus. But mocha mitzvah, a shvus to shvus is allowed. Kedilel b'simin shin zayin sif hey. Umikal mocham also lahavi atinik lebeis hakneses. Don't bring the child to the beis hakneses. Derech chotz she'ena mereves afila en Yehudi. Because you don't really need to go to that trouble. Don't bring the child to the shul if it involves an Issa Drabonon and relying on Shvus to Shvus Mitzvah, whatever it is, because at the end of the day you can do the bris in the house. You don't have to be over any Issa of Hitzah. And many times you do the Mila in the house, for example, if it's cold or something like that. And you're worried to bring the baby out. And regarding bringing the child to the place of where the Zemel is, the Mila knife is, Muta alida en Yehudi, you're allowed to bring the baby by way of an en Yehudi, given the Lekka Rishus Rabbim, because there's no Rishus Rabbim, and therefore it's only an Issa Drabonon of Haitzah. Umikal Mokum, but, says the Mishnah Berurah, Tov Yosel lahavi Zemel alida en Yehudi letinek, better to bring the Zemel to the Tinek. Why? To Im Yavi HaTinek el Zemel, because if you bring the baby through a Rishus of the Rabbanon of carrying, then because after the bris you got to bring the baby back, so you've been over twice, on the way there and on the way back. If you bring the Zemel, then you're only being over it once, and you leave it there. So therefore better to bring the Zemel to the baby rather than the baby to the Zemel. You shouldn't tell the non-Jewish person to be over an Issa Deraisa for Machshir Mila. To Gama Mir Leon Yehudi Bedova She'asim Natera who have a Kashash Shvus Ve'emidu Chacham Divrem, because that's one Drabonon. Yeah, because it's just a Shvus Amir La'akum. And as we said in the Sif, Chazal were Makbid, they were Ma'amid Divrehem like an Issa Deraisa. Va'achof Beis La'vayin El Sim Shin Vov Shin Zayin Sif Hei B'Hagod the Shom Hevi Ramah to Yesh Mekinu Afilu Milsa Deraisa Lo Man Yehudi B'Mokum Mitzvah. However, the Ramah there in Shin Zayin Siv Hay says, "B'mokum mitzvah, we actually allow Amir La'akim for a deraisa. For after Rav Poskim Cholkim Asfarazu, even though many Poskim argue that, for Ikak we really paskin like that, commission because of some the Simon Reisha involved. Mikol Mokum Linyan Mila HaMekel v'Semach Al Divrei Lo Hifsid Im Ef Shabin Nacha. If there's no other way around it, and you have to be asking a guy to do a deraisa, then we can rely on that. And Mikol Shken Linyan Hitzov HaChnasa or Laharib Poskim Ein Lanu Bizman Azev Rabim Va'im Be'aloch, and therefore there's more reason to be makel. So let me just summarize Sifov. We've said Machshirei Mila, preparations for the Mila, not the Mila itself, is not Deicha Shabbos, and therefore you have to prepare everything beforehand. Only the Mila is Deicha Shabbos. And even if it involves an Issa Drabonon, still you don't do it. With regard to telling a non-Jewish person to do something, you can tell him to do a deraisa. Tell him to do a drabonon and not a deraisa. But the Mishnah brings that the Ramah is a das yochid over there and says you can even tell a guy to do a deraisa if it means doing the bris, and we can be making on that if we need to be. In terms of what to do with the Zemel and the Orla after the bris, they're both muktzah. Ideally, you try and not let go of the Orla and then just put it into the offer and bury it, and that's what we do. And so to the Zemel, you keep hold of it, the Moel keeps hold of it, and then puts it away after the bris. Let's just do Zayin, it's a quick one. Zayin, lo hayaloi kamoin, shochuk, be'er Shabbos le'ishchakenu. Kamoin is some sort of medication they would put on the Mila to help the baby recover. So there was, it's cumin, I think in English. Lo hayaloi kamoin shochuk, it wasn't ground, this cumin by Erev Shabbos, on Shabbos itself you can't grind it. You just put it in your mouth, and with a shina you can sort of chew this cumin, this kimoin, and then you can put it on the baby. And again, the minhag was you would put oil and wine, a mixture, and mix it up together, and then that would be some sort of medication. You can't mix it on Shabbos itself. What you can do is you can put them separately. We'll see what that means. It says in the Mishnah Berurah Chof Gimel. This is all before the Mila, because after the Mila it's pikuach nefesh, and you can do whatever you need to do to help the baby recover. Because this is called the Machshir Mila. So you preparing all the bandages and things like that, and the medication is a Machshir Mila. You should have done it before Shabbos. And therefore, if for whatever reason you can't chew the cumin, you should actually push off the bris. because Machshir Mila should not be done before Shabbos, and therefore do the bris on Sunday. Even being over the Rabbanon, still you shouldn't be over it and push off the bris till Sunday. Don't say, okay, you know what, I'll do the bris and let's just see what happens. And after the bris you say, oh yeah, I've got a baby who's had a bris milah, I need to do this. You can't say that because right now, pre the bris, you know you need to have these samamonim. It's better to push off the bris and not violate Shabbos. If, however, after the bris, you suddenly discover, hey, where's the kamoin? And you're in your stock. Then bevadai mutar lahavi after chush rabim you're allowed to bring it there chush rabim, or you're allowed to make it and grind in order to make this medication. You can still do it with a shinui. You're allowed to do it. If you can do it with a shinui, then of course you should try and do that. They would put this mixture of oil and wine on the child. You sort of whip it, the oil and the wine together, and that would be the medication. But if you didn't do it, then you don't mix it like that in that way. But rather it says kol echad levada. What does that mean? So Mishnah says two pshatim. Number one, pirush the asala arvin bakar. You can't mix it together in a dish. You put a bit of oil and a bit of wine separately on the mokum hamaka, on the place of the wound. Alternatively, you can explain the travaya bakara. No, you put them separately in the kara. You just put them separately in the bowl, and then you don't mix them together. And then and if they mixed, then great. And then you just put it from the bowl and put it on the baby. For other chaylim as well, you can't mix this concoction together. Say that.